Welcome to In Your Neighborhood. I'm your host, Jennifer Wakeman. Forks Farm sits on 85 acres near the fork of Huntington and Fishing Creeks in Columbia County. When John and Todd Hopkins bought the property in 1986, they had no idea what their venture would grow into over the years.
We had worked in Colorado on ranches and mainly with horses, but also some with cattle. We had a couple of horses and 6 Hereford cows. We started raising cattle here. And after raising our first batch of cows, we took them to the local market, we sold them, and we realized that we weren't getting paid enough for those to cover the cost of keeping the cow for the summer or for the year.
The Hopkins discovered Joel Salatin, a Virginia grass farmer who has written extensively about new principles for raising livestock.
The idea of raising a cow only on grass and keeping that cow for her whole productive life and selling that beef right to you, the consumer.
These ideas revolutionized Forks Farm.
In the late 80s, we finished our first beef on grass and handed out samples to family and friends and said, try this, tell us what you think. And then the beef business grew, and then we read about Joel using chickens to develop pasture. So we started the Pasture poultry model. And then customers said, hey, would you grow us a pig? And we'd never raised a pig, but we tried that with a few, and then we tried lamb and some other things. So basically 92 is when we sent our first newsletter out and offered chickens for sale. John explained the principles of grass farming as we toured the farm. We're all grass.
Okay.
So we don't till the land.
Right.
That's our crop right there.
Ta-da!
And we try to do things as naturally as we can. We don't use artificial fertilizers, we don't use pesticides, insecticides, we don't use pour-ons or antibiotics. We're trying to place animals in their natural environment and feed them what they would naturally eat. So for a ruminant, like a cow or a lamb, that means forage.
You won't find any grain-fed cattle on this farm. They thrive on the grasses that grow naturally in this environment.
With grass farming, we are letting what would naturally grow here grow. These are all cool season grasses, orchard grass, switchgrass, fescue. We have legumes, the clover, white clover, red clover, and of course clover fixes nitrogen and it helps feed the grass. So it's kind of a self-sustaining system. And the way I look at it as a grass farmer is that every blade of grass out here is a solar panel, and all my energies to grow my crops comes from the sun. And if I manage my solar panels well, then I capture a lot of energy, and that's a free energy for me as a farmer. So if I take my grass down too hard, I've damaged my solar panels and I can't harvest as much energy. If I don't take my grass down enough, then the grass can get rank and lignify, and it doesn't make good forage for feed. So we're constantly pulsing the system with rotational grazing. So we bring animals into a paddock and we leave them there for, in our rotation right now, we're 24 hours on, 1 day on, and then we rest that paddock for about 30 to 40 days until we come back. So we're coming in with the animals and we're eating the top of the grass where there's more energy in the top and more protein in the bottom. So we want to harvest the energy higher up in the grass. We also want to trample the grass.
This puts carbon into the soil and avoids the need for commercial fertilizers. Over the years, the soil composition has improved at Forks Farm.
When we started grazing here in 1986, there were trees coming up in here. This was all goldenrod, and the organic matter was about 2.8%. And the last time we tested a few years ago, our organic matter was 7.5%. In
order to be more productive, Forks Farm stacks different species of animals on the same ground in rotation.
In this field, we're grazing laying hens for our eggs, and we're grazing meat birds behind them in pens, and then we're grazing cattle.
We walked back to find a herd of Angus hanging around in the shade. The cows spend about 24 hours on a piece of ground before being moved to an adjacent paddock.
This strip we would be in for probably 3 to 4 days.
Okay.
So we'd graze a part and then we'd open that up and graze another part and then open that up. So we use the cows to take the grass down, and then we use the laying hens to follow up and scratch through the cow patties and eat the flower live so they're helping us do some insect control and also kind of producing eggs and scratching through things. And then we use the meat birds to harvest the grass, the clover specifically, that comes up after these guys have grazed. So these are our mowers and harvesters, and they kind of prep things for the meat chickens.
The natural behavior of each species benefits the land as well as the other animals.
These little leaves are what the chickens really dig.
Okay.
So by taking off that thick layer of forage like what we were walking through out there, we open it up to sun, and then the clover responds to that. So that's another way that the beef are preparing the ground for the chickens, is by like favoring the species of forage that the chickens really like.
Yeah, it's amazing the difference between this part of the field here versus what we were wading through over there. This field was grazed by the cattle just a week ago. The difference between it and the other field that had not yet been grazed was amazing. All of the chickens start out in the barn at Forks Farm. Chickens.
So these are our baby chicks that we got in and raised from Pete's, and they're too young to go outside. They would be coon babies. This is a batch of 320 birds.
These are meat birds?
Yeah, these would be water.
Those are those ugly ones that can't survive.
So this is what you get, this is how you get them, and then they go out there.
They come in boxes.
These are ones with feathers.
Box of chickens.
Yep, they're hatched one day and put in a box from Quakertown and arrive at the post office. And then we put them under brooder lamps for the first few days. Now these have just feathered out. They're about a week old.
They're so cute.
So once they're feathered out, we turn off the lamps, open the windows, get them hardened off, and then in another week, they'll be big enough to go outside.
Forks Farm's laying hens have a rather unique mobile home.
We designed the Eggmobile for mobility so that we can, there you go, catch that on audio.
Sure, peacock.
So with the wheels, we can move this around, follow the cows.
Thank you to the Peacock for providing us with such a lovely soundbite. The Eggmobile provides shade as well as roosts and water for the birds.
They all roost in there at night. They all go in at night very easily, and as soon as it's dark, they all want to be in there, and we shut them in. And we have another one of these out in the field past the pig.
Oh, okay.
So we have 2 of these running right now.
That's cool.
The Eggmobile's paint job was courtesy of a Forks Farm intern a few years ago. He was an art student and used all the leftover paint he found on the farm to create this design. Todd likes to keep a lot of interesting breeds.
This is a black astrolobe. I've got a lot of different kinds. I've got Wyandottes, the one with the black edging. Astrolobes. I've got Ericanas, the white. I've got barred rocks. I've got speckled Suffolks right there. And then the typical brown Saxon, these guys.
And some of the chickens, like Muppet, are around just for fun. She's a Polish, not known for being good egg layers, but she certainly brings some style to the farm. During the late spring and summer, Forks Farm has fresh chickens for sale. They keep them in pasture pens.
These are Cornish rock cross. This is what's grown in all those big poultry buildings.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a challenge for us to have them in such a natural setting because they're not a natural bird.
They're not smart.
They're not smart, so we have to protect them and we have to shade them and make sure they have really high quality feed. And
now, do they know enough? Are they eating the grass inside their pens
and
things like that?
When we move the pens, and especially when we have clover, you can just hear them like picking the clover leaf. We have 80 per pen.
Okay.
We get 320, 4 pens in every 2 weeks.
Wow.
So we grow these. Our restaurant birds we harvest at 6 weeks.
That's really quick. From the time you get them, it's 6 weeks, right? Or is it 6 weeks from hatch?
From hatch to processing day, 6
weeks. The pens are designed to be moved around the paddock. Like the cows that preceded them, the meat chickens help improve the soil for the grasses that will grow here again next year.
They're also manure spreaders. So we've got this sheet of manure that they leave behind, very high in nitrogen, phosphorus, and of course that feeds the soil and the grass. And so it's a sustainable, you know, you're building in sustainability into the system with these guys. And we move these pens once a day. If we kept it here for 2 days, we'd burn the grass out. So that gives them a clean bed, it gives them a fresh salad, and then they leave behind their waste material.
While the principles are simple, grass farming requires vigilance in order to properly care for both land and animals.
As grazers, we have time, or how long we're on a paddock. We have size, how big or small we make the paddock, and then we have stocking rate, how many animals, and what class of animal. Are they 300-pound calves, or are they 1,200-pound moms with a baby at side? So those are the different tools that we have to tweak and accelerate, decelerate our harvesting and our prep of the land and the forage for the other class of animal that's going to follow up.
It's a whole different style of management.
It is.
So that begs the question, how do you handle a grass farm during a Pennsylvania winter?
We'll graze as far as we can into the winter without damaging our crop, and then we rotate on the farm a dry lot. So we're going to say maybe this field this winter, we're going to house all our cows on this field, and we'll feed hay out here. And so we bring that hay in from other farms. We don't make any hay here anymore. We just make hay with our cows. We'll harvest the hay with our cows. We buy other farmers' hay in. We set those bales around here, and so they're eating that hay and spreading that manure. And that's pretty high impact for that winter, but because we use in a big enough area and because we rotate, we'll be here this year, over there next year, up on the hill the year after, then it gets to a rest. So that's kind of a big application of manure during the dormant season, but then like once spring comes and the ants come up and the dung beetles and the earthworms, like that manure just seems to magically disappear. We do have a dormant season that we have to work around. And there's a lot of us that are trying grazing techniques to get us more into the winter by like stockpiling forage.
Even with the minimal acreage, Forks Farm produces a huge number of animals each year.
We harvest about 60 to 70 head of cattle a year, about 3,000 chickens, 50 lambs.
That's a lot of chickens.
And we're producing about 15 dozen eggs a day.
All of the chickens are processed on site at Forks Farm.
Set up, very simple process. We kill here, we save all the blood, that gets composted. The birds bleed out. We go into a scalder, 140-degree water for about a minute.
Where those buckets are, that's
what
that is? Okay.
That loosens up the feathers. Then we go into a plucker.
Oh, is that a hand plucker?
Rubber fingers.
There's no hand plucking.
No hand plucking.
Oh, heavens.
The birds flop around in there. When they come out, they are squeaky clean.
Great.
Then we take heads, feet off on that table. We go into a cold water bath. And then on this table, we eviscerate and go into an ice bath. And after the birds are chilled down, we go into the next shed and we do bag and tag. And we get everything set up in coolers for the next day, and then people come and pick up the fresh birds. What doesn't get sold that day gets frozen, and we market that through off-farm farmers markets, buying clubs, and save them for the winter time when the grass is gone and we're not processing. We're very seasonal here, don't do any chickens in the winter. So that gives us stored feed to dole out to our customers during the winter time.
John is a forester by trade. He used his knowledge and experience to create a unique environment in what would otherwise have been an unusable piece of ground.
So this was our first experiment at Silvopasture, which Silvo is woods, Pasture is pasture. So what we did is we came into this woods, which was a dense stand of pine about 10 years ago, and it was so thick and decadent the trees were starting to die and fall down. So I brought in a logging crew and we cut most of the pine out, but I marked the trees I wanted to save, and those were seed producing trees. So we have walnut, we have hickory, we have oak, cherry, maple. In a normal forest, you don't have these big broad openings, and those are the openings that we've created. That sunlight lets the trees that we've left get more sunlight, their crowns fill out, they're more productive with seed production, and then we're getting sunlight down to the forest floor. When this was all shaded, there was nothing growing in here because it was too shady. And now with the sunlight getting in here, we can grow a crop, but we want to maintain the shade because specifically hogs don't sweat, so they need shade, and really all our animals need shade.
The Hopkins originally started by buying feeder pigs, but it wasn't too long before they decided to breed their own.
It got harder and harder to find piglets in the groups that we wanted. So Todd said, why don't we start breeding our own? So she did some research. He's snoring.
Great.
We have the white one with black is a Gloucestershire Old Spot. The black one is a large English black. And then the red one, Tina, is a Tamworth. Those are all heritage breeds or old-fashioned breeds.
Right.
And we like those because they haven't been futzed with, and they're better at rooting. They're very low-key temperament-wise.
It may seem odd to raise hogs in a woodlot, but this cycle really makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
As a farmer, we're kind of managing that upper canopy level of the trees and then the lower canopy level of the pasture, and we're using the animals to harvest what's coming out of the trees, to harvest what's growing out of the earth, and also to help us plant and promote forage species that we can also harvest with the cattle.
Like you were saying, you came in here, cleared this out so that sunlight would reach the ground, and kept the trees that will bear fruit and so will in turn feed the pigs that are here to some extent.
Correct.
And then the pigs will kind of till the soil up.
The pigs root and till, and so right there is a pasture that we just had them on. They tilled that for us. We've sowed that to fresh grass seed, and then that will grow, and then when we come back here in probably 3 months' time with the cows, that grass will be like this is. It'll be up and nutritious. So we're using them as our tillage because we don't own plows, harrows, spraying equipment.
Invasive species like multiflora rose and poison ivy are a problem for all farmers. But at Forks Farm, they use hogs rather than herbicides.
The hogs will just root that stuff out, and then if we put the seed in place of the species we want, we've transformed what's growing on the land.
And so how long did it take them to kind of work this piece of ground?
They were in there about 3 weeks. So they'll eat the forage, they'll root and get their minerals right out of the soil, and at the same time we use their feet, so if we sow seed in there before they leave, then they cultipack it for us and get soil contact with the seed, and then we pull off, we rest the land, and then that allows regrowth.
Certain breeds of animals will be more successful on a grass farm than others.
Focus on the breeds that do well in these kind of environments. And for instance, cattle have been bred over the last 50 years to be very large framed because they were a money maker for a farmer that was growing corn and beans. So that farmer would use that animal to feed out and harvest his crop, and then he'd sell that animal. What we want is kind of the opposite. We want a smaller framed, early maturing animal that will do well on forage alone. So we're looking at environments similar to ours, specifically England. So Angus, Devon, Hereford, Highlanders, those are the breeds that seem to do well with grass finishing. And for the hogs, we're looking at the old breeds, the large blacks, the Old Spot, the Tamworth, because they weren't modernized and bred just for muscle tissue.
When we come back, it's market day at Forks Farm.